Hello, everyone, and welcome to Forward Fest and this program, Forward BioLabs Co-working Life Sciences Lab Virtual Tour and Startup Flash Talks. I'm Mike Partsch, Chief Venture Officer at WARF, Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, and I'm a Forward BioLabs board member. Both WARF and Forward BioLabs are part of the Innovate Network at UW-Madison, which is presenting this panel along with the UW-Madison Forward Bio Institute and University Research Park. WARF and the Innovation Network are proud to be Forward Fest sponsors. We'd also like to thank the festival major sponsors, the Greater Madison Chamber of Commerce, M3 Insurance, Madison Gas and Electric, Meter and Boucher, Swink, Urban Land Interests, the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, Whipfly, and the Wisconsin Union. At WARF, we license UW technologies to startups and industry and support startups through our Ventures program, our Upstart program for entrepreneurs of color and women, and more. We are really proud to be a founding sponsor of Forward BioLabs alongside University Research Park, MG&E, Promega, and WEDIC, which is a resource that speeds the launch of biotech startups with their ready-to-go laboratories. Like WARF and Forward BioLabs, there are many other resources for entrepreneurs in the community, including the Innovate Network, which is a group of UW-Madison affiliated organizations that work together to support innovation, entrepreneurs, and startups. Innovate Network members provide services such as classes and coaching from the Small Business Development Center, support for Wisconsin early stage tech businesses from the Center for Technology Commercialization, space and facilities for tech companies at University Research Park. I know you'll learn a lot from our terrific panel today. I also encourage you to explore learning opportunities and resources from UW-Madison's Innovate Network, WARF, and Forward BioLabs at the link in the chat room. We are here to support the local ecosystem and entrepreneurs like those on our panel and you folks at home. Enjoy the panel. Now I'm going to hand it off to my colleague, Jessica Martin Eckerly with Forward BioLabs.
Thanks, Mike. I'm Jessica Martin Eckerly, co-founder and CEO of Forward BioLabs. Today, we're going to learn about a newer resource in the Madison area for biotech startups called Forward BioLabs. And we're going to hear from three very promising and exciting startups that are located at the Forward BioLabs facility. They've been here making rapid progress on their science and moving their companies forward. We've got Tobias Zutz, CEO of Gregor Diagnostics, as well as Eric Spyra, CEO of Endsulin, and John Pattison, CEO and co-founder of Decadence. We're going to start off with a brief tour that's going to set the stage for hearing from Toby, Eric, and John. We'll have a little Q&A, and then we're going to open it up for audience questions. For everybody here today, please enter your questions in the Q&A at any time and upvote questions that are of interest to you so that they float to the top, and then we'll get to them when we get to that part. So the best way to understand Forward BioLabs, since we can't all be here today, is to take a walk through the lab through pictures. So I'm going to share my screen. We're going to look at the labs and then hear from our startups. All right. So Forward BioLabs is an incubator for startups. And the format is co-working labs. These are fully equipped and supported labs. It serves to increase startups' capital efficiency in these very, very early stage companies. We also do our best to foster the cultivation of key relationships that are useful for startups. They're on tight timelines, tight budgets. When they have a need and we can introduce them to a partner or a company or service provider that they didn't know about, it speeds up their work. Forward BioLabs is a fully independent nonprofit. Our operating capital comes from sponsors and membership fees that the startups pay. Our founding sponsors and partners believed that Forward BioLabs was important for our startup ecosystem, and they became involved to help make it happen. It's one thing for a single startup to get their own small lab started, and it's quite another to start a lab for multiple companies. Forward BioLabs would not be here without the support of our sponsors and partners. The goal of Forward BioLabs is to make it as easy as possible for a startup to get a scientist into the lab, start those experiments, and gather data needed to prove out their idea. So to do this, we offer as small of an increment as possible, and that's for us is a single lab bench. But it's not actually just a single lab bench. It comes with several pieces of small equipment that you can see in the picture here. And it also comes with extra ambient room temperature storage and some dedicated storage in each of the kinds of cold units typically available in a lab. And so we offer these benches in our labs. And here is one of the labs that we have. We call it the Horseshoe Lab, where very often a company will take 2 benches and kind of have half of one of these bays, or they'll take 4 and have a whole bay. We've got another lab that houses additional co-working benches. And then we also have some dry labs. These are offered as private mini suites or as co-working labs. One of the big advantages for startups in coming to Forward BioLabs is that all of the equipment in the labs is used as a shared amenity or shared equipment. And this works because almost every piece of equipment in a lab is not used by a scientist for many hours or 24/7. So it works remarkably well for multiple startups to share the equipment as a common amenity. And here we've got more shared equipment and shared infrastructure. And what you see here is just a fraction of what we have at Forward BioLabs, but it's not very exciting just to look at pictures of equipment. We also have extensive cell culture capabilities. 6 BSCs with vacuum, 8 CO2 incubators with piped gas, chilled incubators, phase and fluorescent microscopes. Along the back of the wall there, you can start to see more than just equipment. You see infrastructure. And so what you see there is piping that gets that CO2 gas to the incubators to keep the cells safe and growing. And the CO2 gas, you can see the manifold here, and we've got 2 banks of tanks, all kinds of monitors that contact myself or the operations manager if something goes awry. The same for our cold units here, which have backup power in addition to 24/7 monitoring. And so you can start to understand that it's not just equipment, but also some of this critical infrastructure with multiple layers of safety nets built into our lab that provides extra certainty for these startups, for their product, for their samples that might have come in, so that there's extra protection around those. In addition to lab infrastructure that we just saw and all the safety infrastructure that we provide and maintain, we also provide a suite of lab services that kind of come with every lab, but we provide them and all of our companies kind of partake or receive the benefits of them. Simple things like cleaning, or taking care of biohazard waste and all of the chemical waste, lots of onboarding. So typically when a company starts with us, there's several introductions we make to get them going in the lab, how to use a specific piece of equipment. We connect them to our partners or supplies they may need, in addition to specific and pretty extensive onboarding so that they know how to work in the lab, how to reserve the equipment, and so forth. When a company gets ready to graduate, they're typically ready for another set of introductions. What are we going to need when we move out? Equipment, supplies, where are we going to move? Are we going to need to make any modifications to that space? And so we support our companies all the way through move out. And it works really well. They can get the lab set up and carry their samples over to their red lab that's ready to go. Forward BioLabs also has complete office amenities, creature comforts, so that a team can work completely out of our space, not just the scientists, but the business folks as well. So kitchen, conference rooms, and a variety of office spaces. And of course, the grand entrance, highlighting our sponsors and partners and startups. This incubator, this co-working environment, it really works. It's very effective at helping early stage companies get the data they need to secure further investment. We have helped about 25 companies so far, several of which have graduated and gone on to form more partnerships, secure more capital, They're off to the races, and we're so excited for them. Right now, we're going to talk to 3 of our current members. And I'm going to turn off my share so that we can talk to our member companies. Let me stop share. Thanks for your patience. All right, so with having seen Forward BioLabs kind of setting a context to where our member companies work, we can now talk about the magic that happens in the lab. We've seen the labs, and now we get to hear from 3 companies that are working within the labs. And the first company that we're going to talk to is Gregor Diagnostics. So Toby is a Wisconsin native, a double badger with bachelor's and master's degrees from UW-Madison. He has over a decade of experience working among 3 Madison area startups, the most recently of which was Exact Sciences, where he was a member of the team developing the cancer diagnostic Cologuard. Toby built upon this experience and founded Gregor Diagnostics. Toby, thanks for being here today. Tell us about Gregor.
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. So Gregor is a company focused on developing a prostate cancer screening test. As you mentioned, I previously worked at Exact and got to be part of the success and growth of that company. When I started, there were 13 people there. When I left, there were 650, and I just saw some article there at like 5,500 or something. Now it's crazy to see the growth and the buildings around town and everything that they're doing from those pretty early beginnings and watching that story. So it was a fun experience. When I left, I knew I kind of want to be back in kind of that startup area, right? It was a pretty big company by the time I left, and Cologuard was on the market and all those things. And so went to look for, well, what could be an area where there's a really big need for new technology, new development, and came across this problem with prostate cancer, where it's the #2 cancer killer for men, but screening rates have been declining. And to me, just thought, hey, there's got to be a better way to develop a better screening test. And so that's kind of where it started. Took the company through G-Beta here at Madison in 2016, went down to Texas for a full accelerator in 2017. And then while we were trying to raise our initial bit of seed capital, one of the questions was, well, what are you going to have to buy? What types of materials a lab you're going to have to need, and where are you going to be able to do this in Madison? Like, Madison is great for biotech, but with the money we're going to give you, how much are you going to spend on equipment? How much are you going to spend on buying stuff? And so even in those early discussions before we closed the money, when it was still just me working on this full time, I know Jessica and you guys had kind of talked with some of our potential investors and got them like, hey, yeah, we're going to have this space for them. We're going to be able to give us that opportunity to be really capital efficient in our first several years. So now we've raised, 3 years later, about $3 million, generated some really exciting data, which we haven't shared yet, and I can't really talk about, but it's going to allow us to continue to grow and expand and do that. So this has really served as a great opportunity for us to kind of be very capital efficient in those first days, not have to spend not only the money, but also the time in managing a whole suite of lab equipment, which really is a full-time job for someone to manage, just all the pipettes and all the different specialized equipment that you have within a lab, and making sure that all the safety protocols are followed and all those typical things that need to be done but aren't really driving value for a startup company. So the access to something like Forward for us was really critical in these first several years, and has played really an important part in our ability to get founded and get up and running and really generate this initial early data that our test looks like it's going to work really, really well.
Toby, can you tell us a little bit about the technology, where it come from, and what a 90,000 view of that technology?
Yeah, so we it's unique in a couple ways. One, we're using kind of a panel approach of different biomarkers. So the things that we're actually detecting are proteins, methylated DNA, and microparticles, which are these really small cell fragments of prostate cancer cells. Some of the technology we licensed out of WARF, and actually what got me initially looking at prostate cancer was a discussion with the licensing manager there, Jennifer Gottwald, that went through all the different technologies that they had, and that's initially what had me even looking at prostate cancer. So that's kind of where we started. And then the another part of that technology is coming out of Canada and one of our scientific advisors. But the combination of all those biomarkers and then looking at a unique sample type. So we're actually looking at semen, which, you know, coming from Exact, I don't know if it's better or worse, but it's definitely in the same, you know, category of a unique sample type. But it gives us this very unique biological advantage in that it's a portion of that material is produced directly by the prostate. So you give us this higher biomarker concentration and we can develop a much more accurate test.
That's fantastic. That's very cool. Where are you headed with the company?
Yeah, so we have, you know, a fair amount of development work to do yet and clinical studies before we get this product on the market. Right now we're about 7 people, with really only 3 people that are in the lab full time, and obviously need to grow. And so that's one of the things where I think we're on that cusp of trying to graduate out of Forward and loosen up some space for you for other companies, but also looking for us to kind of find a new permanent home here in Madison, and as we can grow and develop this technology in the company as well.
Very good, Toby. Thank you for that overview.
Yeah, absolutely.
You talked about Exact and man, all of that experience just directly translatable, and do it again, different technology, same outcome. Better.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, that's a pretty big outcome for us if that's successful. So great.
You will be. It's
thanks,
so,
Jessica.
All right, so we just heard from Tobias Zutz at Gregor Diagnostics. Next, we are going to speak to Eric Spyra. So we're turning from diagnostics to treatment and cures. So Eric Spyra is CEO of Endsulin, a company that's working to change the way diabetes is treated using the cutting edge technology of gene therapy. Eric came to Endsulin with experience as an angel and syndicate investor, and he actually led the Series B investment into American Gene Technologies, which is another company working on gene therapy except for HIV. He's also served as the Chief Investment and Development Officer for a healthcare IT company, and he served as the Senior Hedge Fund Manager for Spyra International. Eric, thanks for being here today.
The first thing that I would really like to go over quickly in short order is the disease itself, that our target population is diabetics, potentially both type 1 and type 2 diabetics. You know, diabetes is it's an illness that affects millions of individuals and their families. It's a leading cause of blindness and amputations, and the comorbidities around it, like renal disease and cardiovascular disease, shortens lifespans by up to a decade in general, and the economic burden for these individuals is $500,000 per patient. So it's obviously a well-known disease. Right now, the only cure for it is a solid organ transplant, which requires immunosuppression. And no one knows more about those transplants than our founder, Dr. Hans Sollinger. Dr. Sollinger pioneered the Pattison technique back in the early 80s. The Pattison technique is where you transplant both a kidney and a pancreas simultaneously. And prior to Dr. Sollinger's work, that was a surgery that had a mortality rate of nearly 50% in the first year. After the Pattison technique was developed by him and has been used worldwide, in fact, it's used today, the mortality numbers have declined to under 10% almost immediately. So he's helped in that field. He's also pioneered a drug, the most successful, commercially successful immunosuppressant in history, called mycophenolate, that also came out of UW hospitals and clinics. And in doing all this work, he stood back and he realized that he was the busiest transplant surgeon in the world, yet he was only he was only curing 500 patients per decade. So while millions were left suffering, so this wasn't going to work. So he laid out for himself, but this is back in the mid-90s, he laid out for himself, look, this is what I would love to, these are my goals, to find a cure for diabetes that is non-invasive, doesn't require major surgery, doesn't require immunosuppression, it doesn't require daily management and treatment, and it's accessible to millions. Currently, the standard of care is, everything in the diabetes world on the standard of care is really about managing blood sugar levels with exogenous insulin intake, other than transplantation. So he came upon gene therapy when it was, you know, in its incubator stage, so to speak, in the late 90s. Very few people were aware of gene therapy. And gene therapy, very simply, is re-engineering a virus to carry a design payload of genomic expression. Okay, so a virus typically infects somebody, it affects the cells of that person, and it tells the cell, hey, make more of me. That's what viruses have in their little DNA code inside of it. You know, gene therapy is where you're developing a virus to make a beneficial change to a cell, and either have a cell express something that it's never expressed before, or correct the way it's expressing something, you know, incorrectly. So the best way I can explain our technology is I have a video that's about 90 seconds. Do you mind if I play that? Okay. Let's see here. This 90-second video and we'll be done. So that's my presentation for you.
Thanks, Eric. The possibility of a cure for diabetes is just astounding. It's really impressive. Thanks for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of want to like ask another question or two, but I also want to move on to John. So
Go for it.
I'm cataloging my question, and we're going to get back to it after John, and then we can all have a discussion.
Thank you.
So for those of you who are here today, a commonality among the startups at Forward BioLabs is their enthusiasm for solving really big, really difficult, challenging problems, not just in healthcare not just in healthcare, but also in other fields like agriculture or environmental problems. John Pattison, CEO of Culture Decadence, teamed up with his co-founder, Ian Johnson, to leverage their experiences at San Francisco startups to found Culture Decadence. Culture Decadence won the Madison Chamber of Commerce's Pressure Chamber contest last year And this year, they're a finalist in an international competition called Food for Thought. John, your company is at the forefront of tissue engineering, food and science, and it also has an environmental twist. Tell us about it.
Sure, thanks, Jessica. I'm gonna share my screen here and hopefully we can see this presentation. But yeah, so my name is John Pattison. I am the co-founder and CEO of Culture Decadence. We're based here at Forward BioLabs in Madison, as you can probably see behind me here. And what we're working on is cell cultured seafood, and specifically lobster meat. So making real lobster meat right from the animal cells. And I thought I'd go through kind of the why, what the problem is that we're solving, and looking at commercialization in the few minutes that we have today. So why lobster? Large market, multi-billion-dollar market worldwide. Surprisingly to no one, there is really no lobster meat market here in Wisconsin, at least from a producer, but we're hoping to change that and be the first Midwest lobster company in the world. But yeah, large addressable market for us. And then really the problems with the current industry are twofold. One, from the animal itself. So a 1 pound lobster that you get in a restaurant or at a store is about 6 to 8 years old, and really only yields you about 3 to 4 ounces of meat. And that's a very, very inefficient way to get delicious protein. So we decided to think about that in a little bit more detail and dive into what are some other factors. And those are namely environmental. So the Gulf of Maine, where we get most of our lobsters, is the fastest warming body of water on the planet. And that increase in ocean temperature leads to these animals actually moving out of that environment to cooler and deeper waters. So New England, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, those areas used to be really robust lobster fisheries. Almost no lobsters come from there anymore, and we anticipate that happening in Maine as well. So we're looking to hopefully solve that problem. This is the lobster life cycle that you see in front of you here. To go from fertilization to harvest is about a 10-year process for that 1 pound lobster. So very, very long. We're hoping to shorten that to weeks and months with our technology. Some of the other things that we're looking at too, and like why lobster meat? Well, from an R&D standpoint, it should be simpler because you're just doing muscle cells. You're not doing skin and bone and fat connective tissue. Plus you have a much higher price point like I talked about. And then taking a step back from a macro level, the supply chain. Like I said, lobsters only really come from Maine. They're not farmable or aquaculturable. You have a low protein yield and complex logistics. So it all has to get shipped from that one location. If we can build this technology here in the Midwest, we can provide it at a cheaper cost, less environmental impact, and really to a whole new demographic of people that don't necessarily eat lobster meat on a day-to-day basis, or animal protein, which is also very, very nutritious protein, low in fat, high in different nutrients, vitamins, and things like that.
Hey, John.
Yep.
See if your screen is shared. I think we're missing out on your graphics.
Oh, I had some sick graphics. Okay, I thought I
know.
was sharing
So
there.
you can go back and show them to us because
Let me see.
it's fun to.
Can you see this now?
Yes. Thank you so much.
Oh, okay.
There we go. There's the little lobster.
Okay, lobster life cycle that I talked about, basically from fertilization to harvest is like 10 years. Large market, simpler problem to solve. Because we're only really focused in on muscle cells. We're not focused in on fat and muscle and bone and connective tissue and skin and scales. The complex supply chain, this is where I was. Environmental impact. Seafood in a lot of cases has a larger footprint per pound than pork and poultry. So something else we want to consider as we're trying to create sustainable food systems long term. And this is how we do it. So we take lobsters. We then conduct a biopsy to isolate the cells that we're going after, cells of interest. And then we give them media, so nutrients, salts, sugars, amino acids to get them to grow outside of the animal's body. And then eventually we would harvest that and put it into a form factor that makes sense for consumers to use in a wide variety of applications, from food service to food manufacturing and retail. This technology will allow us to consolidate and optimize the supply chain. It's aligned with many of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And part of that is by only producing what we eat, we're not making the shell, we're not making the organs, we're not really making functional tissue, we're just making the protein that you eat as a consumer for culinary experience. And then we're also creating a way to provide a totally sustainable, traceable, and safe method of food production. How our product will eventually compare. So the main place where I want you to look here is on the bottom left of this slide, where we can offer these new features of being animal-free, mercury-free, plastics-free, quota-free, cartilage and shell-free, really important for all the chefs out there. And then always fresh and just in time. And then hopefully possibly allergy-free too, if we can figure out ways to knock down or knock out some of the genes that cause that allergic reaction for people. Eventually, we hope to have cultured decadence as a primary supplier that goes into all different types of CPG products, bisques and soups and dips and raviolis. And then one day, hopefully at Hy-Vee and Willie Street and some of the other great grocery stores here in Madison area, you'll see cultured decadence seafood that you can buy and take home and cook up however you might want to. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the team behind the tech. This is why this can all happen, and we're here all the time, as Jessica knows, every day here at Forward BioLabs. So phenomenal team from all over the world, but their common tie is working on really hard problems, helping the planet, helping people, and doing it in a place that nobody expects seafood to come from, and that's right here in Madison, Wisconsin. So appreciate you being here. Thanks for all the support, and look forward to your questions.
Yes, familiar faces in the lab for sure. So I've got some questions for John and Eric and Toby. If you turn your screens or turn your video on, and for those of you in the audience today, I just want to remind.
I think I'd still be, yeah, there you go. Sharing. Sorry.
Enter your questions in the Q&A. Upvote questions that you think are interesting. And don't hesitate. Eric, John, and Toby are fantastic. They're open to questions. So I have one. I will start us off. I have a few. Where to start? I am curious. So very early stage startups, it can be a winding road, gathering the data needed to develop technologies and build the team to accomplish it. Toby, you commented on this in your talk, but can we tell everybody, how does Forward BioLabs help execute that vision? Eric, this is something you wanted to comment on.
Yeah, I can answer. I mean, I think for us, we had one very specific question we had to answer on a technical level of, can this be done? And a lot of that was a lot of lab work we needed to get that done. And so that support of not only just having the equipment in the space, but like there were times where we had expertise that was a bit outside, us. Like we at one point wanted to grow some cell culture, and that's not anything that we had done. And so, the people at Forward were able to kind of get us up and running a little faster than normally. And actually, Mike there had actually worked with the specific cell line we needed to grow. So it was like very easy to plug and play and get it up and running as fast as possible, in addition to having all that equipment ready to use right away.
He was so excited to teach Joel the cell culture. I think they bonded over it.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Jessica, I can hear what Toby is saying regarding not having to worry about shared equipment, not just a cost. So first off, what Forward Bio has really been able to help me with is maintaining that 90-10 rule, right? The biggest killer for startups is your initial overhead, and that's a killer. And instead of worrying about finding a lab, retrofitting the lab to fit us, renting out that, leasing that space, potentially for a long-term lease, buying all the equipment, really we're able to come into Forward Bio and begin immediately developing assays, re-engineer our line, work towards manufacturing. A lot of what we do is out of house anyway with CROs and CDMOs. However, this will, we were able to jump straight into proof of concept and figuring out how to characterize the characterizations behind that proof of concept of our material itself. And we didn't have to worry about the 1,000,001 small details of opening up a whole new shop. And so we're able to get this proof of concept ahead of a Series A. And once the Series A occurs, we'll move on. But yes, it's been an excellent experience for us. Very helpful.
And John, I'm going to jump in. We were just talking about, or Toby was talking about cell culture, and we had a question come in here about cell culture. Are lobster cultured cells adherent or not adherent? And what size type of bioreactor do you foresee culturing cells in at a commercial scale? So since Toby had just talked about cell culture, I thought we'd get this one in here from the audience.
Yeah, definitely. Lobster cells are a little bit different than, there aren't probably cells that a lot of people are used to, mammalian or insect. And so they're cultured at different temperatures, different osmo, and they have different intercellular properties. So yeah, at scale, I mean, we're thinking thousands of liters in terms of bioreactor size, ideally, so we can produce that biomass. But because we're also going after different types of 3D structure, there might be room for some type of innovation or repurposing of bioreactors that incorporate scaffoldings or 3D structure into that process as well directly. So yeah, there's a lot of different ways that we're exploring right now, and then we could end up. But certainly excited to be here in Madison because of some of the really great bioreactor companies and expertise here, and definitely open to talking to people about that offline too if there's interest.
Very good, thanks. And while we're kind of on a technical kind of question and talking about the lab, are there developments that you guys can comment on, scientific or otherwise?
For culture decadence? Or
yeah, for your companies.
Oh, right now we've raised our initial pre-seed round of funding, and so we're putting that money to work, building out the team and working more on prototyping. So we should have some exciting, more public-facing prototyping announcements in the coming months.
Fantastic.
Yeah, we have some exciting stuff. Unfortunately, we can't talk about it today. But later in the year, we should have some interesting news. I respect. I mean, one other thing I just want to say about Forward that really hasn't been brought it up here for us is, it coming in as a 1 or 2 or 3 person company is tough, just in terms of building culture and support and having kind of other people around. It can be helpful just to talk through an idea or borrow something that someone else may have. And I think through COVID, especially, having the other companies around, you felt a bit. And I wasn't even there very much, but I hear it from the scientists, even them talking with John and Ian and pestering them a bit, of just having other people around has been a great thing. That's part of this as well.
Yeah, and we had the one happy hour, but we haven't been able to organize a bunch with distancing and stuff. But and who knows, you guys might be, excuse me, you might be graduated companies. You'll have to come back as alumni, depending when we can really get more events rolling. Eric, I'll leave it open for you if you want to comment on any data or anything, or we can come back to that.
I'm going to respectfully stay away from the data at this time.
Totally fine. I understand. Sometimes people ask me, what's new at the companies? Everybody wants to know. A lot of times it's not possible to share things until the time is right. And we totally respect.
Yes, we're not ready to break stealth mode on that.
I am curious, each of you were at well-respected startups prior to your current company. Could you tell us what led you to take the leap to found your company? Like, was it the technology? Was it the startup environment? What was it that lit your passion for what you're doing now?
For me, it's easy. It was Hans Solinger. Dr. Solinger, I met Dr. Solinger in 1982. I was a 14-year-old. I was about 14, and he had done a transplant for my father. The polycystic kidney disease runs in my family. And so 30 years later, I went back to UW I also needed a transplant. And Hans was still at UW. And so he actually transplanted. My wife was a donor, and he was part of that transplant. You know, he did the transplant, and he was always talking to me. And then my son ended up working in his lab at UW. My son's a molecular biologist, and Hans called me in and said, you know, Eric, I need your help. And I just couldn't say no. So that's a very good influencer.
Yes. Wow. I didn't know that. That's awesome, Eric.
Yeah, that's my backstory. And so how could I say no to Hans?
Yep. Yes. He's always moving forward. I think it's really forward looking that he was like, I'm not just stopping at transplants. We're going to keep transforming care for diabetes patients. Anybody else want to come?
And he hooked me with his data, which I still can't share. So.
Sure. Yeah. So for Ian and I, we had been out in San Francisco Ian had been there for about 3 years, and I think had been there for about a year. And when we were looking at different places to locate the company, we knew, having been in the cell cultured meat space, we knew a lot of the challenges that we would lay ahead for us, especially like all the companies on this panel. You know, if you're trying to build it out yourself from the beginning, like there's a lot of CapEx that may not be the best way to allocate your precious funding in the near term. So, and we had seen a lot of companies make that mistake. So I think we probably left and started this, one, because we felt like we had a better idea, two, because we could execute better. And three, there's probably just a level of hubris and maybe unjustified self-confidence in the beginning to start something new and start it out here. But it's certainly worked out so far. And I think that's a slight testament to ourselves, but more so to the team around us and to the supporters that we've had, whether it's Forward BioLabs or the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, UW, you know, for our investors and advisors. So yeah, it's a crazy, horrible, beautiful, wonderful, terrifying ride starting a company. But you know, if you're not going to do it, then maybe nobody else will. And I think that's even more terrifying. So that's how we ended up here.
Yes. Yes to all of that. I agree.
Yeah, I would echo that a bunch too, especially like if you're not going to do it, who else is going to take the lead and get it done? With this problem with prostate cancer, really, you know, I left Exact without the expectation I would do something so similar, and then spent a lot of time looking for what is a big problem that needs to be solved, and didn't really see enough people working on this problem from a company standpoint, and thought, hey, there's got to be a way that we can do this better. And so, yeah, again, hubris and maybe some confidence, but definitely not the whole. The risk to go start a company by yourself or even with a partner is crazy. Like, you probably shouldn't take that risk in most situations, but you got to have a little bit of you know, unchecked optimism that you're going to be successful and move that thing forward. And if you're not going to take that risk, like no one else is either. So you just kind of have to go for it, and things may or may not work out, but that's the only way anything ever actually gets done at some point. So
Yeah,
Yeah, I hear what Toby's saying for sure. You know, a startup company is very difficult, it's very treacherous. And you're gonna need luck. You're gonna need some breaks and you're gonna need some luck. And you can do everything right, you can have tons of luck and it could still not, I mean, it could still be an issue. So but without some luck and contacts and getting other people interested in and making it infectious, excuse the pun, I guess, from my side.
It also makes it a little easier when you have kind of a community like of support of, you know, things like WARF and Forward BioLabs and WEDEC and all those things that are around in the community that can help you kind of measure some of those waters. I mean, we have a relationship with WARF where we've licensed technology from them. They're an investor in ours. Mike is actually on my board. So, you know, if you have really good board members, you're really going to be successful as well. That's just me sucking up, but it's also probably true. And so like, but I think it's more than just the individual companies, it's the whole community that can kind of support these very early stage companies and they can grow into something meaningful for the community as well.
I have to tell you, I feel that somewhat with Forward BioLabs because, you know, you see all the forest fires and you see all the stuff happening in the environment this summer with the heat and every year you get older, someone gets diagnosed with something, and every day I come to work and I'm so inspired by you guys and the companies you're building and the technologies that you're proving out. It's really fun to come to work each day to help companies like yours and to help you move forward with the support that we're always trying to better and keep going with Forward BioLabs too. So kudos to you guys. Hubris, yes, but well worth it. Well worth it. So, and on that note, one of the questions I have for you guys is for people who are thinking of following your footsteps and using their personal experience and their work experience to found or to join a startup, what advice would you have? Like for me, as you think, I would say go for it because a startup is so fun and it's exciting and you're going to learn so much.
People.
What do you say?
People. You need good people around you. I mean, you need the best of the best, and just, you know, go for it. The stronger the individuals around you, the more experience in that industry that they have, the more you can utilize their talents, the more that will grow. So the people is everything. There's about 20 of us at Endsulin between our science advisory board, our board of directors, and employees and contractors, about 20 of us. And the majority of these individuals have prior gene therapy and biotechnology experience. And that's absolutely crucial. And as I said, you got to have a bit of luck too. You have to really look out for that. So, you know, just an example, we're so blessed. We have the former chief science officer of Novartis, the gene therapy, Brian Kaspar, who was at Ohio State and developed the treatment for spinal muscular atrophy. Only the second gene therapy treatment to ever be approved by the FDA. He's on our board as well as the gentleman that brought that through BLM, through regulatory approval, Dr. Jim Italian. It's so wonderful to have people that are on your board that have deep experience. You know, we have Thomas D. He was the chief financial officer over at Avexis before they were bought out by Novartis. You know, these people that we have on the board, and just being around Hans, my God, he's an amazing gentleman. Crazy stories, but it's the people. It's the people that make all the difference. And if you think you can do it yourself, you know, you're sadly mistaken, because somebody knows more than you do. You need to find that person and rely on that individual. And so you need a measure of trust. That's I guess what I would say.
John or Toby, any advice for people thinking about founding a company or joining a startup?
Yeah, I would say echo everything that Eric said, and then just don't be afraid to be original and hold true to what you think and your view of the world, right? Like, people are going to invest in you not because you look like everybody else, but because you look like something different and new and novel and innovative. And don't give that up, because it's going to be tough. You're going to hear no 50, 100 times, and you're going to think, well, maybe I should change something. Maybe I should change this or that or whatever it might be. But you don't want those no's. You want that, 1%, 2%, 5% that say yes, because they're gonna share your vision or at least believe in you, which is, they probably won't necessarily share your vision, but they'll at least believe in you, and they'll believe that what you're seeing is the way that it's going to be. So be original and be genuine, and that's not only going to help attract investment, but that's going to help attract partners in the public sector, private sector, but most importantly, like Eric talked about in the beginning, talent and people. And that is who is going to be crucial to building out your dream.
That's well said. And I would just add on that it's not, you want to make sure you surround yourself now with just people in the company that are great, but outside of that too, right? So the one thing I found as a founder that I hadn't felt previously is you feel the highs much higher and you feel the lows much lower. So anything you can do that's, balances you out and deals with that extra stress and have that support system personally is going to make you stronger to make the right decisions in the business too. So, having a good family and friend support structure is critical as well.
Here's a question from the audience. Do staff members of various companies within the lab interact on a daily basis at all? That's one part of their question. And are they restricted for intellectual property concerns, and how is that managed? So I can speak to that property, but socially, how is it in
the IP stuff? It's like whatever your internal whatever your company's protocols are for managing that. Certainly you are in a shared space, so you can't not see things at times or extrapolate based on equipment or whatever. But yeah, we kind of all sit, there's a bullpen area out there, but you can get the private offices or labs, I guess. We interact, I guess. I know certainly interact with employees from the companies on board here. And we also have a cool feature where we don't use the lobster tails typically in our process. So we put them into the freezer, and all the other member companies are welcome to take them. And I think that's a hit from time to time.
John, people have been saying, when are we having a lobster cookout? Maybe
whenever.
Maybe we'll have to organize one before the Wisconsin winter hits. From Forward BioLabs standpoint with intellectual property, for those that asked, there's a clause in the membership agreement, but there's no sharing. We don't have any specific requirements. As John said, the people generally know what other pieces of equipment each other are using and what teams are using each piece of equipment. And that's actually kind of beneficial, because oftentimes they'll ask questions of each other. Hey, did this work for you today? Or do you think I can use this piece of equipment in this way? So that can be helpful. When it comes to knowing the details of other people's IP, you'd have to be watching pretty closely and looking at data, and they're not obligated to share that. And we don't encourage it either, because that way each company's IP is separate. And the other thing is, these companies are working on a wide variety of things. In 25 companies that we've helped, nobody's working on the same thing. There's not another prostate cancer diagnostic. There's certainly not another company doing cultured lobster and crab or gene therapy. So everybody plays nice in the sandbox. Questions. We have only a couple minutes left. And so I see that there are some questions, mostly on Forward BioLabs related things, but we are out of time, and I've got to turn it back over to Mike here. So for those of you that have questions about Forward BioLabs, please feel free to email info@forwardbiolabs.org or pop over to the website and send us an inquiry. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of the questions. Thank you for being here. I'm turning it over to Mike.
All right. Well, on behalf of WARF, Forward BioLabs, and UW-Madison Innovate Network, I want to thank everybody, our panelists, moderator Jessica, and you, the audience, for this very, very informative discussion. I'm looking forward to the first lobster cookout, so get me on that distribution list. You can catch another Innovate Network panel this Thursday, Launch, Learn, and Pivot, Madison Startup Stories. It's Thursday, August 19th from 1 to 2:30, held virtually online. So again, thank you. Watch for a following email from the Innovate Network about connecting to resources and learning opportunities. And to all of you, enjoy the rest of the fest.